Hi, we are now on Chapter 10 and we're going to take a look at the Develop Your Skills section today. Chapter 10 is about the accounting cycle, classes, and locations. And in this chapter you're going to be, first of all, reviewing the steps of the accounting cycle because you already know those. You learned those in Accounting 116. Very useful feature. You're going to be learning how to enable class and location tracking. You're going to be able to record transactions using class and location tracking and then create reports for class and location tracking. Finally, you're going to be learning about delayed charges and credits and a new beta feature called price rules. Okay. So some of this is going to be a review for you. In this chapter, Craig has asked you to find a way to separate the different segments of his business so that he can keep better track of how each segment is doing financially. He also wants to be sure that the business is following best practices for accounting. So in this chapter, you'll work with Craig on the accounting cycle and to ensure that the business is recording everything appropriately and according to the generally accepted accounting principles. Just as a reminder, GAAP stands for Generally Accepted Accounting Principles, and the GAAP principles are established by the Financial Accounting Standards Board. They're the underlying guidelines that accountants must adhere to for consistency, fairness, and honesty in accounting procedures. Publicly owned companies are required by law by the SEC to follow these principles, but it says many private businesses also adopt them. I'd say most private businesses adopt these principles as well. Okay, so now let's take a look at the accounting cycle steps. And you're familiar with these from Accounting 116. First of all, we have the financial transaction that takes place. Remember, transaction is a business activity that affects the accounting equation. So first we analyze the business transaction to determine the next appropriate action. In other words, what accounts are affected and by how much. Then we record those business transactions in the general journal. And then in step 3, we post from the journal to the general ledger. Finally, at the end of an accounting period, usually at the end of a month, we prepare a trial balance which lists each account by name and the amount as its balance in a debit and credit column versus, depending on which type of balance it has. Then we add down to make sure that the total debits equal the total credits. We usually then do our adjusting entries, but in this abbreviated set of steps, they go right to the financial statements. These usually occur after the adjusting entries, and that's to prepare the financial statements for that fiscal period, usually at the end of the month. So we already know, because I've been pointing out to you, that steps 2 and 3 are performed by QuickBooks. All you do is fill out a form, and then QuickBooks behind the scenes records the journal entry and posts it to the general ledger accounts. But they want you to go back to Accounting 116 for a moment and analyze what's happening in these transactions, these 3 that you see here, and decide what accounts are affected and then what form you need to fill out, basically. In the second one here, you've got a bill that you're receiving from Hicks Hardware for various job expenses that's due in 15 days. They want you to determine what accounts would be affected and then what action to take. What form should you fill out? I noticed when I looked at the 4th one that they don't specify why you're getting these checks. In other words, is it an immediate payment of a sales receipt, or are you receiving payment for an accounts receivable? And what you should do is assume it's the second one. Assume Amy's Bird Sanctuary and Jeff's Jalopies is paying you for an amount they owed already on an accounts receivable, and then you make the deposit for that. So they want you to just think about these, and then they show you what transactions you should have recorded. Okay, so something new. Let's talk about class tracking. This is a really neat feature of QuickBooks Online. It allows you to keep track of income, which means revenue, and expenses by department or by project or event or whatever segment you would like. And so by tracking the revenues and expenses for each individual class, you can focus more closely on particular areas of your business and assess what's profitable and what's not. So they give you some examples here of the types of classes that a retail store or that a construction firm or a not-for-profit might have. And these are fairly easy to set up. You would go to the gear, then select your company, account and settings, and then click on the Advanced tab. So I'm going to try and switch over to our Craig's Landscaping QuickBooks account. Okay, so here we are in Craig's Design and Landscaping Services. So it said go to the gear, then we're going to choose Account and Settings. Then we'll be clicking on the Advanced tab. And then down here where it says Categories, click on the pencil, which allows you to edit. And then we're going to click on Track Classes. And it's nice to click on Warn Me when a transaction isn't assigned a class. And it's best to have one row to each transaction. Then we're going to click on Save. Now that we've enabled classes, we can now create the classes. Okay, so we're going to go to Gear again, and this time we're going to go to Lists, and then to Classes, and you're going to be creating the classes. Let me just expand the screen a little bit. There we go. We're going to click on New. And they want us to create a class for retail. And then save. And they want us to create 2 more classes. One for contract jobs and another for general overhead. Okay, so we've got our 3 classes there: contract jobs, general overhead, and retail. After you've created a class, you can then add it to a sales receipt, invoice, bill, or other form by selecting the class name. So let's do that. We're going to go to Customers and then Sales Receipt. And with a sales receipt, you don't have to select a customer name. It's good practice if you can, but you don't have to because we're talking about a cash sale. They want us to use 2021, and they would like us to put this in October on the 3rd. Okay, the payment method is going to be cash. And the product or service is going to be landscaping services sprinkler heads. Here we go. Sprinkler heads, and it looks like they want 6 here. We're going to tab over. Oops, sorry. Looks like my numlock isn't on. There we go. And then notice the column that's added here now, class. We're going to click on retail so that we can keep track of it by class then. We're going to come to this section, discount percent, later on. Remember to use the appropriate tax rate. When you're doing your puppy love companies, we always edit that to use 9%. Okay, I'm just going to, I better save that just in case we need to use that later on. Okay, back to our textbook. So what we've just done is create the sales form. For practice, they have you create an invoice and a bill and then an expense. I just wanted to point out to you, for the invoice, you're going to be charging landscaping services because this is gardening. That will be your income account. For the bill, these are job expenses, miscellaneous general plants and soil for contract jobs. So you're going to add the contracts jobs class and use job expenses because those will be billed to Tanya's nursery. I'm sorry, to the customer, but they're purchased from Tanya's nursery. And then a $180 expense from the advertising, so that will be advertising expense. Then if you want, using the report center, you can actually create a report. It's already built in there, profit and loss by class. Now let's look at location tracking. And we're basically going to do the same thing. We're going to enable that first and then create some locations. But location tracking allows you to produce financial statements or information reports, they say here, by location. So that might be a region of the country or a region of your sales area. It might be separate store locations, properties, departments, or territories. And this is important. Location tracking differs from class tracking in that it's limited to one location per transaction form. So if you have 3 separate locations, you're going to need 3 separate receipt forms if you're processing transactions for each, whereas classes are tracked by line item on a form. Okay. So we're going to follow our directions again here and go to Account and Settings. So let me click off of this and back into our company here. Okay, so we're going to go to the gear, Account and Settings. We're going to choose Advanced, back to Categories, and this time we're going to click the pencil to allow us to edit, and then click on Track Locations. And the location that they want us to choose here is store. They want us to track by store. But take a look at the other location areas that you can use by business, department, division, location, property, store, and territory. We're choosing store, and we're going to save that. We're done with this. Then we're going to go back to the gear, click on Lists, All Lists, and then this time instead of classes, we're going to choose Stores, which has been enabled here for us. And you're going to be setting up new stores by clicking on the New button. They want us to name them Craig's 1 and Craig's 2. But take a look at the options you have. You can set it up as a sub-store. You can use separate titles on sales forms depending on which store there is you're referring to. This store has a different company name when communicating with customers. This store has a different address when customers contact me or send payments. So there's a lot of options for us there. Let's set up Craig's 1 and Craig's 2. They're just going to keep it simple here, but I wanted to point out all the different options. There we go. And then if we do the same thing, if we create a sales receipt, notice in the upper right section here, you've got options for Craig's 1 or Craig's 2. And I wanted to mention, switch back here, our book tells us that when location tracking is enabled and each location makes its deposits individually, you can also track banking deposits by location. Also very helpful. And you can create sales reports by store. Let's talk about delayed charges and credits. Let's say you're a type of business like Craig's Landscaping, and even though you perform services throughout the course of the month, you send them one bill at the end of the month. Well, delayed charges allows you to keep track of services performed for clients before you add the charges to an invoice. Then when you create the invoice, we actually choose the customer. There's a pop-up dialog box that lets you add those charges directly to the customer that you've already kept track of as delayed charges. You can do the same thing with delayed credits. If you know of a potential sales return, you can create that delayed credit, and then when you start to create the credit memo and select the customer, those delayed credits automatically pop up, and then you can populate the credit memo using that information that you've already recorded. These are both non-posting entries. In other words, there's no journal entry that's created from these. It simply stores the information until you create the invoice or the credit memo. The last topic I wanted to mention deals with price rules. And this is a new feature of QuickBooks Online. Fairly new. It's in the beta version right now. QuickBooks Online Plus and the advanced version allow you to track unique price rules for specific customer types, or for specific product service types, or specific date ranges. So for example, if you want to have a sale, a spring sale, you can set a particular deduction for a particular rate of or a particular time frame. Or if you want to promote a brand new product or brand new service, you can set up a % or dollar amount of deduction for that as well. So a rule can be a fixed amount, or it can be a percentage, or a custom price item. And you can apply the rules to all customers or just specific customers, to all products or simply specific products. Okay, so we're going to go back to the ear again, Account and Settings, and Sales, and then under Products and Services, we're going to turn on those price rules. Gear, Account and Settings, click on Sales, and then there we go. Turn on the price rules. So we have to click on the pencil and then check mark the box and then click on Save. Okay, so let's set up a new customer. Sorry, I don't want to deal with those notifications at this moment. Oh dear, sorry about that. There we go. Okay, so let's set up a new customer. I'm going to go to Sales, Customers, and then click on New. And the book does not tell you the name of the company. I'm going to flip back to the book now for just a moment again. But the company should be Designs by Kim Christian, which they tell you later on here. But when you set the customer up, you really need to start by putting the name of the company in, Designs by Kim Christian. They give you the information for setting Kim Christian up. So let's go back to that. Okay, so Designs by Kim Christian. And we'll put her name in there. And the billing address as indicated, 1415 East Sunny Way. Oh dear, I can't seem to type today, can I? And that is, oh dear, sorry. Sometimes it's just a little too helpful. Bay Shore, California, and then the zip, 94326. Okay, we're going to save that. And then let's click on Gear, All Lists, and we want Price Rules, which is below Product Categories there. And we want to create a rule. Okay, the rule name, we're going to call this New Pest Control. We're going to select our customers individually. Don't worry about the date. We're going to have this specifically for pest control services, and we're going to use the percentage basis. We want it to decrease by 10%. And no rounding. Okay. They want us to select the customer. So we're going to choose Designs by, where are we here? They've got it under Kim Christian rather than Designs by Kim Christian, and we're going to save and close. Now when we create a new invoice, and we choose Kim Christian, there we go. They want us to put a pest control services in here. And it looks like 2 is the quantity they would like us to use. Okay, the balance due is 63. We have the discount percent appear there. We're going to use 10%. $6.30 automatically comes off. Now this looks a little bit different than what your book looks like. The book handles it slightly differently, but remember this was in beta version, so sometimes our book looks different than our than what our actual QuickBooks Online looks like. Okay. On theirs, it's shown directly off of the rate itself, but that's okay. And then finally you can tackle the tasks if you like, do a few more invoices, and enable more class tracking, enable different locations, apply class tracking, and create some support reports if you'd like before you go on to the reinforce your skills and apply your skills. But that ends our lecture for the develop your skills for Chapter 10.